really welcome to the Danish Parliament. And personally, I've been really looking forward to this small conference on Turkey and human rights. Human rights has been part of my political agenda for really many years. And for me, I couldn't do it without it as a politician, because human rights for me is basic law for how we are organizing our societies and how we respond to each other, and the basic for democracy and freedom of speech and assembly and all the good stuff. And I know that Vive, you will, as a representative of Amnesty, really give us an insight into what is happening in Turkey these days, and the same with Johan. And for me, I would like to use this opportunity to be a pupil. So when I'm finishing with my small introduction, I'll go down and sit on my chair and learn all the good stuff from you guys. For me, it's if I should just add a few more words on why this conference and seminar is important for both on a personal level, but also on a more in the bigger picture, is that democracy as so is under pressure all around the world these days. And every year we get our yearly surveys from Freedom House, and we can see the ranking on how does democracy develop, or the opposite. And if I don't misremember, last year's report said that there was a setback in 83 countries in the world, and there was only one country who had seen a progress in democratic development. The rest of the world's countries and nations, it was status quo. And if you look out in what is happening, for sure, not at least in the war right now in Ukraine, but also what is happening in China, the repression of the democratic movement in Hong Kong, and the religious minorities inside China, mainland China, but also what is happening in US, when you see the whole debate about fake news, Trumpism, and very concrete right now with the mass shooting of kids in Texas. So the world is on a very vulnerable place right now, and it's not only the democracies who's threatened, it's the climate, etc., extreme inequality, economic inequality. So that's a big back curtain when we have this discussion today. And we'll focus in on Turkey and Turkey's role on a geopolitical level, I expect, but for sure also what is actually happening on ground between people, between political parties, between government and the opposition. So I'm really looking forward. So Mustafa, could you come up and be the moderator?
I'm welcoming you all on behalf of Set Them Free, but I'm also the chairman of an association called Dialog which was established in 2002 in Denmark. First of all, besides us talking about a very significant and important issue like human rights, I also think that for me, as a person who has been an active participant in the Danish debates, I wouldn't say that I am an expert in human rights in general, but I think I'm aware. But my interest is, of course, growing every year when I talk with people of importance in relation to human rights and the violations there. But first of all, I would like to present our speakers today. First of all, before I invite them up, inform you about that we have the Secretary General of Amnesty International Denmark, Vande Klarup, with us. She took on the role in 2020, as far as I am informed. 21. And she will present a report from 2021. I read it with huge interest, and of course there are many areas that report covers. and I'm sure that there are significant areas which the Amnesty International is focusing on. And then we have with us today Professor Johan Vande Lanotte from Belgium. He is a former deputy minister and economy minister, and also interior, if I'm not wrong, minister of Belgium, or maybe I'm wrong there, but doesn't matter. Many different political roles at least. Today, and he's a professor of law and human rights, and today he's the president of the Turkey Tribunal, and he will present us their findings and also the prospect of what's going to happen with the Turkey Tribunal. So I would first like to invite both our presenters. First, Vivi Klarup up, and then also Mr. Professor Vande Lanotte to present afterwards.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me and having Amnesty to say something about our annual report. And thank you, Uffe, for hosting us. It's a great honor to be with you as well. And as Uffe said, he's a pupil and he's here to learn. I must confess that I am too. I took on my role in Amnesty 5 months ago, so I have a lot to cover, and I hope today you will make me more prolific in this debate on Turkey. So, every year in Amnesty we do a report on the state of the world's human rights, and we did so also for the last year. And today we're zooming in on Turkey and how Turkey is doing as a human right on human rights. And as Uffe said, when we do this, we do it at a time in the world where things are volatile, vulnerable. We are uncertain on what is going on. And let me start not by quoting our own report from Amnesty, but another report that came out this spring that is called the Democracy Report 2020 by Varieties of Democracy. And they said a little bit about how the world is doing currently. And it's looking a little grim, I think, because we can see that democracies are on the decline. In 2001, 72 countries were on the road to democratization, and now the number is only 15. And as you can see, vice versa. In 2011, 5% of the world's population was living in a country that was on the road to autocratization. Now the numbers have risen to 35%. That is scary. And it's scary, I think, because this means that a growing number of the people on the earth is experiencing these kind of attacks on human rights, limitations on freedom of speech, media freedom that is under threat, minority protection that is under pressure, and freedom of assembly that is under threat. And in many countries we see that there's an attempt on civil society at large. So this report, unfortunately, tells how Turkey is one of these countries that are on the road to autocratization. And with me today, I have the results of our report. And it's a heavy report with a lot of numbers, a lot of cases, a lot of examples. And I'll run through some of them and point out a few things that really troubles us at Amnesty. And to start someplace important is on the judiciary system that we see is under pressure. I guess many of you know that especially the Ankara Bar Association has been in some kind of fight or at wars with the government for several years. And also last year, 12 lawyers from the Ankara Bar Association, but also lawyers from the Izmir and Istanbul Bar Associations experienced investigation for criticizing homophobic and discriminatory remarks made by a public official. I can't remember what he said, but it was something about homosexuality being a sickness and something that pollutes the family for generations. and the lawyers were opposing that. And also, unfortunately, we saw that the parliament voted to prolong emergency powers that allows the dismissal of public servants, including judges and prosecutors, which is a severe problem, I think. And also because it was without the possibility of judicial review. And when we ask our colleagues in Turkey, they tell us that they feel that there is now an atmosphere of repression, and that it is seen many places in society, which is serious, I think. Another area that we saw rather spectacular attacks on human rights is when it comes to the rights of women and LGBTI plus people. I think all of you, at least it also echoed in Denmark when the government withdrew from the Istanbul Convention, a very famous convention that so many women around the world has always been very happy about. But the government withdrew in the early days of 2021. And it was at the same time that a lot of Turkish women experienced domestic violence was on the increase because of COVID-19. Many families had to stay at home, and it created tension, and a lot of women were experiencing increased domestic violence. And also at a time when we know that women in Turkey die at a very high number due to domestic violence. Almost 300 women died last year because of domestic violence, and we think that around 300 women have died for other reasons that are not accounted for. So it was a major step. And and luckily the Turkish High Court has urged the government to annul the withdrawal and says that it's not possible to withdraw from this convention. And when this ruling was made, I at least saw in the television thousands of lawyers from around the country gathering in front of the court and witnessing that luckily it's not that easy to withdraw from the convention, but we'll see what happens. Another thing that was troubling in our view is that we see a smearing of the LGBT plus society. We've seen the Minister of Interior called students at the Bosphorus University LGBT perverts. And we've seen that when the government debated the Istanbul Convention, they said that it's a convention that will normalize homosexuality, which is, in my view, a very strange argument. And then we saw also, again last year, that there was a ban on the prides. And we noticed this, and we are sorry to see this, because we've seen in other countries on the road to autocratization that this smearing of this minority is a trademark of governments, that creating hatred when it comes to minorities. I've just visited with colleagues in Hungary and saw the same kind of government-led smearing campaigns that can lead to hostility against the LGBT plus community. So we are very aware of this and following it. And then there's the issues of human rights defenders. It's always been very important to Amnesty to pay a close eyes on what's happening with human rights defenders. And also, last year we saw in Turkey that we have issues here. I think there's 8-10 cases described in the annual report. Here I've just taken a few highlights from the very infamous case against Osman Kavala and 8 other activists who are part of the Gezi Park trial. And I think you know that Osman Kavala was acquitted for attempting to overthrow the constitutional order, but the the Istanbul Regional Appeals Court overturned the acquittal, unfortunately. And right now we're seeing that the Council of Europe is calling on Turkey to comply with the earlier judgments to release Osman Kavala. And it's really a case that is a serious violation of human rights, and I think it's very important to see what happens here, because it kind of sets the tone in the Turkish human rights defenders area. Another area that is troubling us is the freedom of assembly. One of the most spectacular cases is, of course, what's happening at the Bosphorus University these days, where we still see a lot of activism going on, and unfortunately also saw that the police forces are using unnecessary and excessive force when trying to break down the protests. And you see here that there's been detentions and house arrests. But there was also a march, night march on the Women's Day, International Women's Day, where 17 women are facing up till 8 years of imprisonment for participating. And I think we still haven't seen what's going to happen with them. And then there was a smaller case in the fact that it was maybe didn't make it to the Danish media, but I think it was important that the gendarmerie used tear gas when a village, Iskedere, there was villagers there that tried to protest against a mine that they're afraid will harm the environment, and it was a rather harsh thing that the police did there. So, and then again, the pride is under attack, as it has been other years as well. So there's something about the freedom of assembly that is troubling us as well. And also, when it comes to freedom of expression, we have described a number of cases, and what is noticeably is that the European Court now is really trying to have a dialogue with Turkey, both on the Ahmet Altan and Nasla Ilicek cases, but the European Court is also trying to state that this idea that it's possible to have a verdict on insulting the president is not incompatible with the right to freedom of expression, and we'll see what happens on that. And then something that's been an Amnesty trademark for many, many years is always to try to see what happens with disappearances, to try to document whenever a country is using torture. And also we've seen cases on that. In the report we have a description of 5 cases. We have them here. Hussein Galib, I'll not try to say his last name. Yusuf Biltunç, Mehmet Siddiq Metche, Osman Shiban, Garibe Geza, all of them in troublesome cases that really worries us, and I think they stand out as they are described there. And something that we are, of course, are very troubled by and continue to be looking into. And then the last thing I'll talk to you about is the situation on the refugees and migrants. There seemed to be a shift in Turkish politics from protection of the many migrants and refugees in Turkey, from protection to now a focus on deportation, unfortunately. And we've seen, as is with the LGBT society, is also with the migrant and refugee society, there's a tendency to a shift in the tone of voice from the government, and we can see that many of these migrants are now experiencing attacks and some of them violent attacks, and some of them Syrian, some of them Afghans, and we've seen, and I think you know more about this, that the authorities now try to have a wall at the border with Iran. And there's been numerous cases of pushbacks, and in the report we have documentation on that as well. So those are some of the areas that we are concerned with as well. And that's, in total, a lot of things to be said on the human rights situation in Turkey, I feel. So I think we're here today to discuss what we can do about it, what we should tell the Turkish government is necessary to do. I've just listed a few things of them here, but of course I think today will be a debate where we can dive into what should be done. From Amnesty, we've read this report with great concern, and we really feel that there is room for improvement, and that Turkey should, and we hope it will, break away from the road to autocratization, and be again a democracy that really observe the rights, the human rights, as it should be. So these are the findings, and you can always read the extended version of the report on our website for Turkey 21. So thank you. Teşekkür ederim.
And now I would like to invite Professor Johan to make his speech.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I want to thank everyone because it gives us the opportunity to talk about very essential things that are going on in Turkey. And we will start from the Turkey Tribunal, explaining a bit what we did and how it went, and coming to the International Criminal Court. So, how do I do that? Yeah, okay, thank you. Now, that should be the one. Fantastic. Okay. We started with the Turkey Tribunal. First of all, who are they? There is an important element when someone is examining, evaluating something in Turkey. He's by principle suspect. He is suspected to be a Gulenist, a Kurdish terrorist, foreign traitor, or whatever. So it's important to know this Turkish tribunal who were them. The president is an NGO, it's a small NGO, and the president was Professor Mark Bossuit. He was the former president of the Constitutional Court of Belgium, and he was the president of the United Nations Commission for Human Rights. So he is not suspected to be anything of partiality. And the members of the Turkey, Jan de Bok, he was a former diplomat of Belgium in the United Nations and in the European Union. Christine Musse is a lawyer from our office. Mrs. Pauwels is director of the University of Brussels, and Professor Vande is director of the University of Ghent. Why am I giving this you information? Because we really want to show these people had before nothing to do with any of the parties that are at stake here. They're just independent, critical, intellectual persons who were occupied by what happened in Turkey. Why we started it? Actually, I'm working at a lawyer's office. I was before university, but at 65 we have to stop, so I'm a retired professor actually. And I'm only working now in the lawyer's office. And when I came there, we saw that we had different cases that we were defending of Turkish people before the European Court, before the UN Committee of Human Rights. There were resolutions in the Parliament, in the European Parliament, but it didn't help. So that's an element. We started the Turkey Tribunal after we saw that no institutionalized organization and procedure was helping. We at that time were not yet aware that even the European Court in the Kavala case was not followed, in the Demirtas case was not followed, in the Alton case was not followed. But it was a kind of frustration. We can do what we want as lawyers, but it doesn't help. So we needed a new platform. We had to do something that a new platform could be extra, showing extra what was happening. That was the real, that was the real departure of the Turkey Tribunal. And why I'm explaining that, we first went to the official institutions. It's not that we anyhow wanted to skip that way. We did it and we're still doing. But the frustration was so that we had to do something else. That's why we started it. And we took a decision when we started the tribunal. A lot of people's tribunals, and I do not criticize, but that's perhaps I have another formation as professor at law. A lot of tribunals have people who are activists, which we need, in the tribunal. We didn't do that. We had people who were working on it, who were activists, we had reporters who were specialists, but the tribunal was made of judges. Nearly all were judges, and as you see, Professor Francois Stulkes, he was Vice President of the European Court. Lady Bianco, Professor Malin Verny, were also in the court. Johan Westenhuis was in the Constitutional Court of South Africa. Mrs. Bynes was a bit different, she's more activist, that's the only one. And John Pace was the Secretary of the United Nations Commission on Human Rights. So these were not people who were suspect they had a long career in judging. And that's, you know, when we started then, the week that we were in Geneva, we had made a reservation in a small hotel, not too expensive. It closed down for COVID, and the owners put us in a very nice big hotel for the same price, so we were very lucky. And the embassy from Turkish Embassy came to the owners there, to the director, and she said, there are terrorists who are in your hotel. Lucky the lady was someone from Belgium, which I know, and she know, of course, Professor Tulkens. So she said, but it cannot be terrorists, these are decent people. But you see, all the time it is claimed those who are criticizing are terrorists or traitors or whatever. People from Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, all the same. They're always, because what they say are seen as to be terrorists. And that, of course, you cannot say, but they still try. But we wanted to be very correct in this. These were judges who we gave reports to, and we had witnesses, and perhaps it's important to notice, we had per subject 3 witnesses. One who was alleged to be member of the Gulen movement, one who was linked to the Gulen movement, and one who was, let's say, in the human rights movement. And we did it on purpose. One of the tragedies in Turkey is it's a segregated society. You have this part, you have this part, they don't speak enough. And everyone has been victim, but the victims do not come together. We wanted to bring them together. It was not easy. It was not easy. And there was a lot of suspicion between them. But for each subject, we had one of these 3 groups coming in. Because we think in human rights, it's not what you are, what you did, what is your opinion, is the fact you're a victim. That brought us together, and that's why we did it this way. And that's I think it's the first time that these 3 groups were actually speaking to each other. And it was sometimes a bit hard, yeah, but why not? Can you speak? It can be hard as long as you listen and try to understand. What are now the conclusions? The opinion is what the judges decided. You can find this easily on www.turkeytribunal.com. It's easy, you can find everything there. The conclusions, I will give them shortly. First of all, about torture, we stated that there is a systematic and organized use of torture, particularly with people perceived to be linked with or supportive of, and you see, linked, supportive, it's very vague, that's all the time. The conviction of very vague, of the Gulen movement and the Kurdish people, or people ordinary crimes. You will not find in this description the human rights activists. Torture is, a lot of them are put in prison, but less torture. That's, I don't know why, most probably because the purpose of the torture is punishment as such, but also to get a list of the names of these two movements, which with human rights activists is different. They are known, they do not need to torture them to know who the activists are, if I may say so. So that was the first conclusion, torture, and we talking about each year about 3,000 complaints a year on torture, which is quite massive. Abductions, with a very specific situations. You have domestic abductions, people who are picked up on the street in Turkey itself, and most of the time disappear for 3, 4, 5 weeks, 6 months, even forever, that they do not returning, some people, unfortunately. Always are tortured and then brought back to the police after they have signed a declaration. These domestic abductions are denied by the government. The government say it doesn't happen, doesn't exist. It's a bit ridiculous, because in a lot of them you see, after 3 months of disappearance, they are caught just in front of the police office. They were walking there and the police find them by coincidence. So it's completely unrealistic, but the government denies. We have enough proof that it exists by footage, by witnesses, by all. We tried always to have 3 sources to be sure about this domestic abductions. And you have the international abductions, which is a very specific situation because every country tried to deny it. The Turkish government is proud of it. You know, with the coup d'etat, the failed coup d'etat, a lot of Turkish people were really afraid that again a dictatorship would come in. Mm-hmm. So the president who went against this coup d'etat, he was a hero. And his popularity fainting, he is proud to say, we brought one, because he said, the coup d'etat, that's the Gulen people. So each time he can pick one in abroad and bring them to Turkey, he said, once again, I'm fighting against these people who wanted to destroy the democracy. So they are proud of it. And they find we have impunity, so we can say it. It's a very remarkable situation. It's the first time in history of human rights that enforced disappearance are presented by the government who does. All governments deny. Turkish government for the extraterritorial, they are proud of it. It's very amazing, and that will help us actually in the ICC case. So here we have about a little 60, more than 100 people who were abducted. Typical democracy has to do with elections, of course, but democracy has to do with press freedom and with independence of the judiciary. Balances, checks and balances. Parliament, executive power, elected power, but press and judiciary. The press is completely, I think, at the feet of the government. Everyone who was critical has been put in jail, has been closed down, and the real opposition comes from people who live abroad in Turkey, who are not in Turkey. And lucky enough, with internet and the situation, you still have some oppositional free press that exists. With a lot of problems, shut down, they start again. That's the only big advantage with this type of situation. They can never shut down definitely everyone, because through internet you can every day change your system and come back. Also, the people do not easily reach you, that you cannot easily reach them. But let's say the classical press is really organized and is in favor of the government, does not allow any criticizing. And it's, let's say, an average, it's like it's a quotum. It's not, of course, but it looks like you have always between 90 and 110 journalists in jail. And when they liberate, sometimes they take some new ones. If you see the last 10, 15 years, it's always around 100 people. So just to make clear to the journalists, take care, because we're still there. If you are publishing something, you can be the next one to be in jail. And it's always that situation that happened. The Alton case was one of them. He was condemned for being communist and for being Gulenist, which is a remarkable combination, if you can imagine. Perhaps this was, and it's related to the next one, the judicial independence, but impunity is probably the most important. As long as people think they will not be punished, torture is not a problem. You torture people and you have no problem. You abduct people, you have no problem. You can do everything without being punished. I think this is a key. As long as impunity will stay, it will not change. And this impunity is manifest. We have a long explanation that's here very, very clear. It has already been a problem, but since 2016, since the failed coup, it is clear there is no possibility really to defy a situation before the court. You can never get a policeman punished because of torture. It doesn't happen. We calculated that you had a chance of 0.5%, 0.5% that the chance that someone was convicted for torture. 0.5 of the complaints. We do not talk about when no complaint was introduced. So that's impunity purely and clearly. And that's linked, of course, independence of the judiciary. It started with the Gezi protest. Gezi was a park in Istanbul. They wanted to build. There was a mass demonstration in the whole the country. And then afterwards, at the end of that year, you had the judiciary investigation against corruption leading to people in government and to relatives of the president. And these two actually was the starting point to start the elimination of critical judges or independent judges. It already started here with 400 or 500 people that were eliminated, those who were examining. In official papers still today, they call this judiciary persecution a coup d'etat. They call it a failed coup d'etat, the fact that judges were examining it. But with the failed coup in 2016, they took their chance. It was, as the president said, it's a gift of God. And one night, they had more than 4,000 judges who were dismissed. So the coup was organized, and within 12 hours, 4,000 people were dismissed, prosecutors and judges. But certainly, there are a lot of things to say about what happened with the coup d'etat, how it was organized, how it was not organized. And if you are capable in 12 hours to dismiss 4,000 judges, then you were prepared that something could happen and to take profit of it. That's clear. And of course, this means independence is completely gone. And meanwhile, 1/3 of the judges are new ones, very young people, without examination, without formation, without education specifically. And in the judiciary, those who are independent are afraid. That's normal. And what you often see, the people who are really still careful, when you are supposed to be a member of the current movement, the minimum sanction is 6 years and 3 months. That's tariff. Okay. And what you see is that judges go fast. They give fast 6 months, 3 months, 6 years, 3 months, and then they say, we release you while the rest is going on of your appeal. So they know we cannot do otherwise, but we do as fast as possible, so we can release you as fast as possible. It gives a good situation of the fear also these judges have, because the day after they can, of course, be innocent. That were the conclusions of the Turkey Tribunal. But we were discussing, actually, COVID had only one good element for us, and that was that we had more time, and we were thinking longer. We took two years to prepare it, because COVID is what each time postponed, and we were continuing to think it. And we came to hold a discussion about crimes against humanity. We made a report on it. We presented it to the court, to the tribunal, sorry. And actually the tribunal, after some discussions, these people are not some people who easily decide, they said, it's of the view that acts of torture and enforced disappearance committed in Turkey in applications brought before an appropriate body, so ICC, and subject to the proof of the knowledge and intent, because they are not criminal judges, our tribunal, could amount to crimes against humanity. That was the start of the next step. This was for us very important, because from the beginning on it was clear we have this tribunal, and what comes after it, how will we go on? And so we decided that we would work further on this crimes against humanity. from human rights violations to crimes against humanity, from the Tribunal to the ICC. That's what we decided to do. And that's our draft petition. Actually, it's 2 weeks ago that we finished the draft petition. What did we do? We have been collecting more than 500 statements, 540 actually, on torture, related to more than 800 victims. We had, I think, 750, 800 we selected. One of the problems, and I can understand that it's not easy for people to say what happened. You know, the victimization of victims. Huh? People are ashamed. They are the victim, but they are ashamed. They do not want to say again what happened. It's horrible situations. When we had in the Turkey tribunal, people started crying because what happened. But okay, we succeeded to have more than 500 people on torture. Strongly denied by the government. There's no torture in Turkey. That's coming to Ali, but no. So it's difficult to prove because the system of medical examination is criticized since years. We have very few independent doctors who state that someone has indeed suffered torture. There is very few times that doctors can examine themselves without a policeman next to them. Lucky we have some statements, we have declarations of doctors who helped us, who said that is what we had, and we think these 800 victims are reliable testimonies. 500 cases of enforced disappearance, I told you about, 27 domestic ones, and 31 extraterritorial enforced disappearance. This, you will see, this will be crucial for what we do next. Domestic disappearance are denied by the government. We have always 3 sources to prove, and statements and footage and so on. The extraterritorial are never denied. They're proud of it, as I said. The government does not deny, they just find it not illegal, because the goal is right according to them, the means is also. We added to what we did in the tribunal, the third crime against humanity is imprisonment against, imprisonment in violation of fundamental rules of international law. That's the third crime. And which is the most massive one. And where we have the torture cases, most of all people from Gulen movement and Kurdish movement. The enforced disappearance, the last 5 years, only the Gulen movement. This imprisonments are general against everyone who's critical. Everyone who's critical, I think it was Amnesty International said, everyone who's critical at the end can be considered as a terrorist. And so we had in Turkey official figures, not our figures. 1,900,000 people who were investigated for terrorism. 1,900,000 people investigated. More than 350,000 have been condemned to be member of a terrorist organization. 350,000. Only 30 to 50,000 are in jail because they have no room anymore. They have no room in the jails. They will build more than 100 jails, they said, because they have to put the people still in it. But it's massive. It's massive, and you have judgment of European Court. We documented 11 judgments of the European Court, and Demetras and Kavala are the most typical ones, but not the only ones. We have 17 opinions of the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detentions, case studies that they had. We have the study of the judges, the organization who explained about 4,000 judges who were imprisoned at a certain moment. So we think this is very clear, it's massive what happened there. And it is a bit unknown, I must say. People think this is something that happens, but 1,900,000 people. And what is very important, once you're detained, and now they most of the time detain 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Every week, 200-300 people are detained, new ones. But when you are in this situation, for instance, your social security system knows that it happened. Which means when you want to find a job, this employer says, oh, yeah, No, let me go. It's social debt. So this 1,900,000, they have lots of problems, socio-economically, to live a normal life. The consequence is that Turkey has the highest number of refugees leaving the country. It's not economically a starving country, but the number of Turkish people who are leaving their country is the highest in this whole European system. And why? Because, you know why? If 1,900,000 people are investigated and losing their job and no future, then you leave, of course. So this is a very massive element that is rarely known. It's not well known. That's a bit a problem. But okay, that's what we had. And so we, in our opinion, think that these three elements must be considered as crimes. Why? When someone is tortured, it's not a crime against humanity. It's a crime. Crimes against humanity are crimes, but committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack against the civilian population. That's the definition of crimes against humanity. You have to prove that there is a massive attack. And then the crimes themselves can be prosecuted. That's what the Rome Statute says. So that's what we try. How can we prove it is an attack? First, there must be a course of conduct. It cannot be a mere aggregate of random acts. It's not something that can happen at random. Now and then someone is tortured, now and then something disappears, okay, now and then there's a stupid judge who is imprisoning someone. That's not crimes against humanity. It must be a course of conduct. We think it clearly is. If you see the numbers, if you see the spread around the country, if you see that the system is behind, we think. It must be directed against a civilian population. At this moment, it is clearly directed against the Gülen movement, against the Kurdish movement, against opposition people who was opposing the government. Clearly. They are the victims of it. They are, and it's said to them, if people are apprehended, detained, it's said why they are there. It's said because you're following this Fetto guy, and you're following the Kurdish, and you're violent, and you're whatever, traitors. Kavala is an international espionage, and so all these things. They are said why it is. So, yes, indeed. It must be in furtherance of a state policy. Yeah, there we have most of them. I'm lucky because they think they have impunity. They are declaring it themselves. They are saying they are fighting everyone of the Gülen movement. They say wherever they are, we will find them, and they will not see the light of day. They say that about the Kurdish peace, they will destroy them, that they are traitors. They say about people who are critical that they are foreign traitors and that they do not belong in this society. It's not something that you have to invent or to guess. They are amazingly expressing it because they are not afraid about being punished. And it must be widespread or systematic, one of the two. Actually, we think it is both. It's widespread, you saw the numbers, it's over the whole country, and the system behind it. There is a madness in the system, or there's a system in their madness. We think the both is there. Sorry, wrong quotation of Shakespeare. So we think we clearly prove the existence of the attack. First step. Now, the different one comes. Because Turkey has not ratified the Rome Statute. Of course not. Some countries did not, the United States did not. They think that Russia in Ukraine should be punished for what they do for the International Criminal Court, but they do not accept it themselves. A bit hypocrite, but that's not the case now. Turkey has not ratified, so you can say, what are you doing? However, we have two judgments, one in the Comoros affair, which was a vessel for the Gaza, and more known is the Rohingya case. So the Rohingya people were expelled from Myanmar to Bangladesh. Myanmar has not ratified the Rome Statute. Bangladesh did. The International Criminal Court said it's clear when a crime is committed on the territory of a state that is member, or it started on territory of a state and were then continued elsewhere, or it started on a country that is not member, but it ended in that country, like in Rohingya, then we have jurisdiction. meaning that a crime starting in a country that is member state of the Rome Statute and ending in Turkey will bring the jurisdiction to the ICC. And that's what and that's why I said these cases of international enforced disappearance are so important. We have 9 cases of enforced disappearance that started in a country that is member state of the Rome Statute. Albania, Bulgaria, Cambodia, Gabon, Switzerland, Mongolia, Kenya. I'm forgetting one, but that's no problem. That's because I'm old. And there we have these cases. They started, abducted the people, and it's important that element of the crime must be committed on them. For instance, the fact when you abduct someone that he has no access to the lawyer, that the lawyer cannot introduce an appeal to the judge, for instance, typical, but always happened. And even in a lot of these cases, there was a court order not to deport, and still they were abducted, kidnapped, taken 2-3 days, and then on the plane to Turkey. So the crime was committed partly in that country, so we have jurisdiction. We are in order with every part of the jurisdiction. We're convinced of that. And I'm just now in time with that. Okay? Thank you.